Hey, this is Stefan.
This is Ada.
And welcome to Living Simply in Mexico.
If you're ever one of those people that has binge watched House Hunters International or Mexico Life or any of those other HGTV shows that make you want to buy a house in a foreign country, this is going to be a great episode for you, and a little bit almost behind the scenes, getting in the mindset a little bit of the real estate perspective.
Today we've got David Hoffman. And David was on Mexico Life for quite a number of episodes. This is actually a long video, so we've made some titles below along the way so you can fast forward if you want to see certain topics. I would say if you look for buying a home in Mexico across YouTube, they're going to give you the same sort of stuff. And so we're going much further in depth in these areas. And so we're going to go beyond, fideicomisos and all that other stuff to some really interesting thoughts that we went through that David is here to share with us.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, yay! We know you're a busy guy.
No problem. And I hope you like what you see. We've spiffed it up a little bit.
I always liked this house. So when you guys bought this house, I was pretty happy about that.
So David actually was our agent on two house buying episodes. What do you call that? Two of our
experiences?
Yes.
Adventures
in house buying. He was our agent on our first house that had a water view, and then our most recent house, which is larger, that has a sort of a mountain river view. I worked at a consulting firm for my first job, and it was really interesting as you kind of know the type of people that work there. And I always looked at the backgrounds of the folks we were considering for a real estate agent. And David came up as working at the same company. It's like, I know the type of people that work there. You were COO of a company at one point?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, so it's like, this guy is not fly by night. And I think I can talk to him about things and can be honest and say, hey, we're not looking for a house in the near term, although we did buy in the near term. And David took us up and gave us some good information. And I thought that was really good because a lot of people say if you're not interested in buying today, well, we're not going to have time for you. And you took the time for us, which was tremendous.
If I remember correctly, I don't think you guys were ready to buy.
No.
You actually pulled the trigger very, very quickly. But
it was a 3 to 5 year plan, and we happened to come down on a whim. Being the planners that we are, we knew that we wanted to buy a house eventually, like kind of 3 to 5 year plan. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, hey, relationships are important to us. So we thought, let's go find somebody that could potentially be a good fit for us eventually.
Yes, and so when we chose David as our agent, we wanted to get ahead of the game and build that relationship ahead of time. But beware, because sometimes when you do that,
you might buy a house sooner than you expected.
Exactly, that's what happened to us. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about looking at houses.
For that initial process, it's like we showed up and then you had like the list, you had like 2 pages or 3 pages.
It was like 13 houses.
Like, okay, here's what we're going to see.
20 minutes apart scheduled. It's like, wow. All right, so it wasn't 13 or so. It was probably more like 6 or 8 houses, but it felt like 13. So that's a good point. Be sure that you don't overwhelm yourself and really stay more focused on what you would like to see.
Once you start to get a feeling for what somebody wants, we set up a schedule. We try to find houses that make that look like they would match what you're looking for. Right. And kind of go from there.
Right.
But we do have to schedule them. And the weird thing about the schedule is because here the listing agent attends each one of those showings.
Yeah.
So for that, we've got to call up the listing agent. We have to make sure that they're available. We have to make sure that the renter is okay with it. If there's a renter there, there's a lot of things to work around. Sometimes I will throw in something that doesn't quite match because there are clients of mine who say, you know what, I only want to see something modern contemporary, or I only want to see something that's more of an original type of feel, more traditional style. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you show them something that's just a little bit different from that, and that's actually what they really end up wanting. So sometimes they do surprise you a little bit.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll throw in some of those.
We looked at Sayulita, we looked at Bucerias, we looked all around, but we really found that Puerto Vallarta was best for us. And so when you're planning your tour, either have a broad one or do a very focused one, of course. David has some thoughts on that.
There are ways to set up tours that would be really tiring to say, okay, well, let's see 5 here and 3 here and 3. Usually when I've got clients like that who don't know where they want to live, it's like, okay, so let's spend a day looking at one in each one of these areas, for example.
Wow.
Give you a feeling for kind of what it is. Because there's no sense in seeing 3 or 4 places in this area if that's what you don't like. There are people who love the marina. There are people who don't like the marina.
Yeah.
There are people who love Bucerias. There are people who don't. Nuevo Vallarta the same way.
Yeah.
And so if that's an area that you like, then let's focus on those for another day.
Alrighty, so I've always thought in my mind that there are different types of buyers. I categorize people for better or for worse. So I wanted to get David's thought here.
A couple of questions for you, and I think this goes down the line. The first question I have, because we're a certain type of buyer, right? Or we're a certain type of buyer. No more. but what's interesting is do you in your mind, when someone meets you for the first time, do you sort of, I hate to say this, but categorize people in a certain way? Is it like this is a newer condo buyer that wants to have access to downtown, or this is a person that wants their solitary sort of area by the beach? Do you categorize buyers in a way?
A little bit.
What are the general sort of?
A little bit. You have these people who they want to be right in the heart of the romantic zone. And you have people who they're just not fans of hills. Or they want to be really walking distance to the beach. They want to be close to these types of things. So you try to get a feeling for kind of what's important to them. Try to get a feeling for what their budget is. Not to say, hey, look, can I go to the top of their budget? Can I go above their budget? But it's more so that I'm sending them stuff that actually fits within what they can afford to do. Because I tell people all the time too. It's like, let's work within your budget. And I say this all the time. It's like whether your budget is $100,000 or if it's $1 million. You have a budget. Stay within your budget so that it's something that you're comfortable with. And let's find something for you that works, that's going to make you happy.
Yeah.
Something that's not going to stress you out too much financially. It's going to be your happy place, because that's kind of what we want, right?
Regardless of where you're at in Mexico, whether you're on the East Coast or West Coast, even within the town here, Puerto Vallarta, even the colonias are very different. And so it's really important to have an understanding of your location.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really huge difference between being in El Centro, romantic zone, and being in like Marina Vallarta or Nuevo Vallarta.
There are some people who they really want to be in the romantic zone, or they really want to be outside of the romantic zone because they don't like the noise or the busyness of this. Giving people an idea as to what areas might work for them based on kind of what it is that they're looking for. I think it's important to do that.
Yeah.
I have clients who say, I want to live in an area that that is outside of town.
Yeah.
And it depends on kind of where they want to go. If you're not a native Spanish speaker, or you don't speak some Spanish, some of those colonias can be a little bit more difficult to get to know your neighbors.
Yeah.
And they're great, but it's just tougher to get to meet your neighbors.
Speaking of difference between, was it Versailles and Marina Vallarta and Nuevo Vallarta? In fact, they changed the name, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah, what is it now?
Nuevo Nayarit.
Nuevo Nayarit.
All right, we'll make sure we're being 2022 plus.
That's a little odd to me, because they've done all this advertising for all these years for Nuevo Vallarta, but for whatever reason they decided to change it.
Yeah. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how that goes. But it's a very different lifestyle, extremely different lifestyle.
I actually sell more in Nuevo Vallarta than what you would think.
Yeah.
I've had more listings there.
What do you sell most?
Very different.
What do you sell most?
I sell mostly probably in this area. So Zona Romantica, Amapas, Conchas Chinas, on the south side of things, but I'm selling more and more in the Versailles area.
The restaurant scene there is kind of taken off.
They've got a lot of really good restaurants.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of little cute cafes. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's flat.
Yeah.
Because there are people who want to just be in an area that's flat. And it's flat. It's more affordable. But it's not inexpensive, but it's more affordable. You are still close to a lot of stuff.
Mountains versus ocean view. I have to say I'm a water guy, but the hills are definitely growing on me.
Yeah, the mountain and jungle are really amazing, looking into the valley. And yeah, when my mom was here, I had to kind of rip her away from this view. So something to consider.
Because when you look out your window right here, for example, I mean, you've got the jungle, which is amazing.
Right.
You've got the river down below. I mean, most people think of the ocean right away, and that's what you've got in your other house.
Right.
And that's cool.
Right.
And we were talking about this before. It's like it's a very different style.
Yeah.
You've got that incredible view of the ocean. But this is also very special.
Yeah.
And the view of the river is actually really lovely.
Right.
People don't realize that. They
The sound of the river.
I love that. The more time you spend here, you actually do spend more time looking at the jungle. Because there is something really special to that as well.
No, I totally agree.
I had a little trouble editing this video because that hissing in the background, I thought it was just some sort of technology thing, but actually it was the river in the background. So it is good, it's wonderful and relaxing, but it's not good for making videos necessarily.
What's interesting here in Puerto Vallarta, and actually Brighton West, who does the Almost Retired in Mexico video or vlog, basically brought this up, and I didn't realize it, but it makes sense. He was talking about La Paz and talking about what we're doing here in Puerto Vallarta. And he said that the commonality of the two places is not only are there people coming from the U.S. and Canada and around the world coming to visit, but there are local tourists coming to visit.
It's a Mexican tourist
Yeah,
destination.
we have a lot right now. I mean, most of our tourists
it's
right now
all
are Mexican nationals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is fantastic.
I think that's a big strength of it because once
Yeah.
again, you get the festive feel of being in a place that people want to go.
So this is a great example of the new high-rises, the traditional homes.
And another high rise.
We do have a lot of people looking for condos. We have fewer people looking for houses. That is starting to grow. A lot of people come from the States and they think, you know what, I live in a house, I've never lived in a condo, so I want to live in a house here. If you're not going to be here most of the year, a condo is probably a better option in a lot of ways because there's less maintenance. You don't have to worry about your roof if there's a leak. You don't have to worry about security. We don't have a lot of security issues here. But still and yet, if you're gone from your house for 6 months at a time, things can happen in any city.
What's interesting is that I think our most viewed videos, besides our we bought a new house video, happens to be we haven't been in our house in 9 months, post-pandemic, house maintenance. This guy happens to be really handy. He is, and we have a trusted person that when we have something that breaks down, we can talk to him and he helps take care of it for us. That having that person is really is great. If it were just me, I am not handy. I could break a steel ball.
So I think that in general, for a lot of people, condos are the answer. They're easier to rent, unless it's a huge villa, of course. They tend to be easier to rent because they have amenities. So if you're looking at something where you're spending, $400,000, $500,000 on a house versus a condo, in a condo you're probably going to have a pool, you might have a gym, you might have, security for the building, you're close to, to everything. Condos, in particular, you're looking at modern contemporary and you're looking at traditional style. And they're two very different animals. We were talking about this before, where some people really like traditional and there are other people who like modern contemporary. And then some people have an idea that they want this, but then they actually realize that they want something different. And if you're looking for something that's, traditional style, probably fewer, you're probably not going to have that rooftop pool in a lot of those places. Some you will, but not as many. Modern contemporary, you're more likely to have a rooftop pool. So it depends on kind of what you're looking for too.
When we think about our house purchasing experience and what we were looking for, our initial thing was a hose down house, right? We wanted something very simple that friends come over, worst thing that happens, you just hose it down, you're good to go.
I did a smile and nod.
So
I don't know what a hose down house is, but now I got it.
Yeah, now the interesting thing is that this house, while it's bigger, is kind of a hose down house in the sense that it's very simple. It's once again, if you come and you're going to steal something, what are you going to steal? You're going to walk out with the sofa or with the huge chair. It's that there's really not anything. It's kind of going back to the simple life, and I think that's one of the things I think that's appealing for us. And I think a lot of the people that do watch our channel,
tile, steel, and concrete. If you've got those three things, you've got a house that we like.
yes.
I do sell quite a bit of pre-construction. That tends to not be the majority of my sales. The majority of my sales, the people who I end up working with, a lot of them, they're looking for something that's built, and a lot of them are looking for something that's actually more traditional style. I end up with more listings that are in smaller buildings that are traditional style than I tend to in the larger buildings. It's funny because I'll say that that's a favorite of mine. I do own something that's much more contemporary as well, but my condo here, it's more of a traditional style. I tend towards that. I like tile. I like I like the tile floors. I like cement. I like these types of things. I like character. But I really I work with both.
This next part here is really thinking about what you value more and realizing that it's not always about your square footage that might be important.
Yeah, although I would have to say, if you look at all the real estate listings, square foot or square meter of condominiums are quite a bit higher than houses. So here's our discussion on that.
Now, a question for you. I know that there's a significant difference, I think, per square foot cost for condo versus a house. And does that also relate to contemporary versus traditional as well? What do you see there?
It does, but I will say that I think that, it's not always as easy to just say, okay, price per square meter for this versus that, and they should all be similar.
Yeah.
And I think, and again, some people would disagree with me. I think some people have a tendency to focus too much on the price per square meter when there are a lot of other factors involved.
Yeah.
You could still take them into account. You can do other machinations to say, okay, well, it has this and it has this, so then we're going to raise, we're going to lower, we're going to do those types of things. But
yeah.
I think that's a really key point. You can have a huge amount of square footage, but if it's an awkward layout where things don't make sense, so you kind of feel like back in the Bay Area, we have the Winchester Mystery House, these doors that go to nowhere, and if it has this feeling of being, boxed in or strange ways that you have to access certain rooms or certain public areas, even though you might have more square footage, it's not going to make as much sense as maybe a smaller footprint that has a really nicely laid out and well thought out plan.
So there is flat, and then there is on a hill with a view.
especially when people are looking in the romantic zone. They want to be in the romantic zone and they want to have a view. Well, a good part of the romantic zone is flat.
Yeah.
So your view, if you're going to have an ocean view, if that's really what you want to have, or even if you want to have a mountain view, you're probably going to be looking down a block.
Yeah.
Because that's really going to be your access path to the water. Because if you say to yourself, okay, look, I've got this view, what can go between me and the beach? So for example, if you had a sliver of a view here right now, like what's between here and the beach? Well, we're a distance from the beach, so that can go away. The chances of you losing this view, hard to imagine that something's going to go up and take all of that because of the sizes.
Right.
But it's like, when you are a long distance away from some things, some of those things can take away your view over a period of time. And so with houses in general, houses are of course small.
Right.
They're not 10 stories tall.
Right.
So if you've got something that's 10 stories tall, you've got a better chance that you've got a few of those floors in particular, that have a view. In the romantic zone, a lot of those are 6-7 story buildings with a rooftop pool. So some of those may have a view. All of them may have a view down the block.
But they may have that common area that does have the view, and it's a place that you could go up there, read a book, and enjoy your
But the other thing too is people focus a lot on I want to have an ocean view, and I totally respect that, and I totally understand that that's important. But at the same point in time, it's like if you're close to the ocean, you're going to be down there a lot anyway.
Right.
Yeah. And I learned this early on, and this is, I think, in the minds of people who do have ocean views currently, like in our other house, for instance, is, and I think you may have mentioned this early on, is if you're not on the beach, there is a chance that you will lose your ocean view, regardless of how high you are.
Yeah, I mean, so we're up there in El Cerro, and it's like there's, certainly
there's a good chance a condo can come right in front of us there.
Right.
So that's always something to consider when you're
trickier with your hill. There are things that make it trickier, but at the same time, you can't say that it's impossible.
Right.
So you can't say that a view is guaranteed.
No, definitely not. So something very much to consider. Here's the interesting thing for me, and this is the way I look at it. And it seems to be that there are fewer fixer-uppers on the market lately because they may have already been bought up. I don't know. But maybe we haven't seen them. But to me it seems that if you buy there's a premium on a turnkey house, and if you buy more of a fixer-upper house, labor is cheaper here.
It is.
And so if you do that right, and you pick the right contractor, you could really benefit from that. What are your thoughts?
You can. The thing about it is, it's like, especially if it's going to be a longer process, I think it makes a lot of sense to be here for that build. Because
Yeah.
otherwise you may have your aesthetics may be a little bit different from what your contractor is thinking. And so just making sure that the plugs are where you want the plugs to be and those types of things. The
Oh, yeah.
aesthetics the stairs match. I mean, there are some aesthetics that just make different that are different from one person to another. That if you're doing something that's substantial, being here as part of that process, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's funny because there are a lot more people who want something that's turnkey than they do anything else.
Right.
It's like any house, it's like, and if you watch these shows, you'll see it too. It's like, they're like, oh, I don't like the paint color. Like, well, that's an easy one.
You made up a great point about being here when construction's happening. We didn't have that opportunity, so what we did was we had the contractor take a lot of pictures, and we had our friends stop by and take a lot of pictures. And literally the day before we were supposed to come in, they hauled our jacuzzi up the hill by hand up to the third story and plopped it down, and then concreted it in. We had our person take a picture from the condo next door, and we looked at it. It's like, I think they put the jacuzzi in backwards.
They had it so when you sat
down,
you
you're
were looking
facing
at a
to the wall.
instead of turning it around. You're
Instead
facing.
of
Wow.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
So look,
So much for the ocean.
So we-
love the wall.
right.
So
right.
what's great about doing contractors down here is like concrete's like Legos and everything, right? They do a good job and they're used to doing things over again. And so we called them that day. The next day we were down here and they had already unconcreted it, moved the jacuzzi the right direction, reconcreted it in by the time we arrived,
Yeah.
and painted
That
it.
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. One thing that I think is an important thing to talk about is giving people cautionary tales about, we really, like, we had a really unique, our first house was one of those things that just doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, you mentioned this before, right?
Yeah, it's funny
And-
because I have people who ask me, they're like, oh, I want a house like theirs. It's $100,000 with an ocean view.
Yeah, it doesn't exist, at least you've got to look for it. So in this section, we're going to talk a little bit about furnished or unfurnished. And, a lot of these houses actually do come partially furnished, maybe not always with your favorite, decorative ideas, but go with it.
Take the furniture because you never know what you may need, and it's sometimes hard to buy stuff down here, at least the things that you may want right when you move in.
Yeah, it's a process.
So there are people who definitely want to buy something that's already done, that's fully furnished. A lot of our houses, a lot of our condos in particular, a lot of them are sold fully furnished. Usually not with the artwork. Usually, there's usually some personal
that's interesting.
items. Yeah, because artwork's very specific, right?
Yeah.
You can say, I mean, if you look at my art, I've got one that's like, I really like this painting a lot. And the maid was telling my partner, like, oh, you should get rid of that. That's really ugly. Well, thank you.
Go figure, go
Right,
figure.
Thank you. But it's art's very subjective.
Yeah.
So art is one of those things that a lot of times isn't included. But aside from that, a lot of these places are sold furnished.
Yeah, are
That's right.
those new construction places? Or
No.
are these ones that are like people are leaving, so hey, take all my stuff?
Right. So pre-construction, if it's pre-construction,
Yeah.
those are almost always not furnished. A lot of times they don't come with a refrigerator. Because the thinking is like, do you want a refrigerator that has the
Yeah.
doors or underneath or upstairs? It's like there are so many different types of refrigerators, and people are really kind of picky. That a lot of times they don't come with refrigerators. A lot of times they don't come with washer and dryer. Same thing. People have they have a feeling for kind of what it is that they want, and it's different from one to another. Range usually comes with a range, stovetop, those types of things. Does not come with furniture. Usually they don't. Sometimes they have a furniture package. Usually not.
Interesting.
Well, and I mean, with our, of course, the first house was nothing, although there was a couple stories on the beds. But this house was different because this house we did have a lot of it was furnished, and then we just had to go and get some other parts, which we actually ended up kind of going custom route with some furniture just to make it kind of match the vibe of the house.
I think that's really helpful because the thing about it is too and I tell people this, is like whether or not you go, what, I don't like this table, or I don't like that couch, or I don't. Day one, you've got a place to sit.
Right.
You've got a table to sit at. You've got all these things here, and then over a period of time, you can go, okay, now it's time to replace this. So you're starting with something. You're not doing the whole air mattress thing, which I've done before.
All right, want to let it down? I'll drop it on my head. Meanwhile,
Remember when you dropped us off at our first house? And we were supposed to have an Airbnb next door because it was definitely not move-in ready. Definitely not move-in ready. There was like an old mattress in an old frame that was in the house they're going to pick up the next day. And they dropped us off downtown, and our Airbnb was actually miles away.
Yeah, note that there are addresses that are sometimes the same, but they might be 30 minutes away from each other. That's what happened to us. So we thought we had a place right downtown, and it turned out it wasn't. So
we had no place to stay. So luckily I brought a plastic sheet with me, because everybody brings a plastic sheet with them when they move into their house. And we went up there, and it's like, well, we're just going to stay at our house, but we had this old mattress. So basically we put the sheet over the old mattress. We did bring some bedding, and so that's where we slept the first night. But anyway, I digress.
But yeah.
You just didn't tell me that.
Oh, yeah.
I will come across as biased because this is my job, right?
You're an agent. Yeah.
Yeah,
A realtor,
so I'm gonna, you should always use a real estate agent. There are some things that are different, and there are, I have had some folks who found something specifically and they wanted to buy it, and they made a deal and whatever, and I put them in touch with a real estate agent here, or with a closing coordinator who's an attorney here, because there are some folks here in particular who are closing coordinators, attorneys who I really have a lot of faith in, and there are some really good people here, and so I think that if somebody does do a for sale by owner, I certainly think that they need to have somebody involved in that process to help them with that, because there are, you could end up with a deed that doesn't show the correct price,
Right.
Because somebody's trying to save some capital gains and they don't understand the ramifications as to what that can mean when they sell and those types of things. So some things can happen, or understanding where your beneficiaries are laid out, or which trust bank you're going with, or those types of things as well. There are a lot of complications in the process here that we try to make very easy, through the course of things, but that can trip you up if you don't have somebody kind of watching out for you. So whether that's a really good real estate agent, or if you don't and you've gone with for sale by owner, which I've never done that anyway. Some people, they kind of like that type of a thing. I've never done that. There can be little bumps.
What I see though in that is that if you have a seller agent, that you've actually kind of passed the bar of you're a legitimate seller. It's officially on the market. You sort of got a feeling it's legitimate at that point. Whereas for sale by owner, it seems like sometimes houses are passed down through generations. There are multiple owners. Maybe one person wants to sell and three
who's
don't.
on that deed?
Who's on the deed?
Is
there a deed?
Or who is the beneficiary? Or somebody thought they were beneficiary, maybe not, and then there's some long lost, cousin somewhere.
There is something to be said for that. So when you're talking about those types of things, if you've got a property that's listed, then you know who the owner is, and depending on what agency and what agent has done this. Anytime I list a property, and this is the same thing for the folks in our company, it's like we have to do a capital gains assessment. And capital gains, it's really confusing to a lot of people. There is an easier way to explain it, but it's a lot of math and kind of explaining kind of what it is. But it's important to know kind of what your capital gains tax exposure may be, because it's based on the peso gain. It's not based on the dollar gain. It's based on the peso gain because it's pesos here. So understanding that and understanding what you might come away with as a part of that process, if you haven't gone through an agent who does those types of things in the first place, it can be a surprise, and it can be a negative surprise, and it can be something that hurts a deal. So the same thing if you're buying from somebody who doesn't understand that, they may not want to move forward once they find those things out, if they haven't already gone through those types of processes. Most agents do that here. There are people who make peso offers. There are that tends to be more with a Mexican seller. Mexican sellers tend to be more comfortable with a peso offer. You can make an offer in any currency that you want to, and it's up to the buyer, or it's up to the seller to say yes or no, and to counter offer however they'd like to do that. You can certainly do that.
Interesting.
With a Mexican seller in particular, it's probably they would be probably more receptive in general to a peso offer than an American or Canadian seller, simply because they know what that's going to be in their currency. right? It's like, okay, so Mexican seller, maybe they're buying in another part of Mexico or something, and it's going to be a peso offer, or they're using it for other funds and other things that they're buying down here in Mexico. Whereas if it's an American or if it's a Canadian seller, they're thinking, okay, I want to use this money and I want to buy another property in dollars, or I want to use this in the U.S. or Canada. How many dollars is this? And if the interest rate or if the exchange rate is going up and down, then it's a little bit more confusing as to what it is. They may or may not feel as comfortable with it.
Got it.
Pesos versus dollars. This is an interesting one. Please comment below if you have any clarifications here. But here's my take. If you're purchasing a house for $100,000, let's say it's a really inexpensive house, right? And you
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. You sell that house for $100,000. But in that time period, since even though you're buying and selling in dollars, especially in more tourist markets like Puerto Vallarta, the actual taxes are based on pesos. So let's say the value was 15 to 1 pesos to the dollar, and then it went to 20 to 1 pesos to the dollar. So when you sell for that same amount, however many years later, you're actually having a capital gain on it because you're getting more pesos back, even though your dollar to dollar is the same. So if that's confusing, yeah, it kind of is, but the reality is you need to watch out for fluctuations in that. So let's talk briefly about the buying process.
You actually wrote up a number of years ago, sort of the overall buying process and what someone should know. And that's online, correct? Is that something you can take a look at it?
Yeah.
And that's probably a good just read instead of listening to us try to pull
Extract that
to
information.
get that from David and us jabbing a lot. You can actually go and read that. Where can people?
Well, we can link to it.
We'll put a link to that.
in
And
there.
that is yeah. And so actually, David also is on Facebook too. So if you want to connect, that's a good place to connect with you.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but yeah, so we'll put a link to that document that David put together. But do you have any just summary comments on the buying process or what people should be aware of?
Well, I think it's like any other place. You have to have you have to be aware of what it is that you want, and you have to have and communicate those to your real estate agent. Make sure your real estate agent understands where it is that you want to be or what type of area that you want to be in, how many bedrooms or bathrooms are really necessary for you. A lot of people do downsize. I downsized when I moved down here as well. So a lot of people, it's like I don't need like a large home. Like I had a larger home in the States. I have like a small apartment here because it works for me. But it just depends on kind of what it is that works best for you. So here are my list of needs, and here's what I'm looking for. So then hopefully they can narrow down, the list of the properties that are on the market. That list is smaller than it used to be.
Yeah.
But they can narrow down that list and say, okay, here's kind of the things that might be a match for you, and you can kind of go from there. Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, cool.
So one thing we didn't ask David, that's fairly standard, and that's why we didn't ask him, is the idea of having a fideicomiso, which is basically a trust to own your property if you're near the water. And so if you're in that situation, I think, in our previous videos, say, oh, you can't buy property in Mexico because you're close to the water. The reality is it's just a trust, and you put your money, or actually the trust owns the home, and you own the trust. Simple as that. And so we have 2 on both of our houses, and it works just fine. But I just wanted to mention that since we didn't ask David.
One of those parts that's always kind of fun to watch in these like HGTV shows is the whole idea of like you've got 2 people that are probably buying this, hopefully they're buying this property together, and there's going to be probably some compromise and some negotiation between us as we're deciding what we're going to be doing to then present ourselves to the seller.
Yes, and usually in the shows, it's about what type of house they want. We know the type of house, but it's about how much money do you want to pay.
And I think the one final note on the buying process, the tough part is finding your place, negotiating. I think negotiating is, at least for us, that's always the difficult part because you're negotiating. It's not a win-win at that point in time. Someone wants money, other person wants to sell for more, you want to buy it for less, right?
Yeah,
that's probably the toughest part for me. What are your thoughts?
It can be. There's a sweet spot in some negotiations.
Yeah.
Where you have the buyer who pays a little bit more than what they want to pay, the seller gets a little bit less than what they want to earn, and then in the end they're both comfortable with what it is.
Yeah.
Those tend to be those are decent deals.
Yeah.
But there are others where it's like there's an opportunity and people jump on an opportunity, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
So some people really need out. In this market, we don't have a lot of desperate sellers.
Yeah.
So in general, there's not a whole lot of negotiating. Just in this, because this market is a little bit different. We're definitely not sellers.
Well, and I would imagine too, the dynamics you have between husband and wife, or husband and husband and wife and wife, or whatever, that the buyers of the house, that whole negotiation thing, that's an interesting thing. We experienced that with you a little bit, because you knew that I wanted the house, and Stefan was just like, after we talked to you the first time after seeing this house, he's just like, there went all our leverage, Ada. He knows you want our house. And I was just like, well, I do, and but it's
So much for keeping that tone down.
No, but at the same time, it is important to go, there are things that I say to people sometimes too. It's like, sometimes when you're out looking at places and you say to yourself, okay, like, they're like, well, I don't know, and I've asked people before, like, if I tell you tomorrow that this house is sold, how are you going to feel? Is this one of those things where you're going to feel like, oh my God? And if so, then maybe do something. If you go,
right.
and I think I said that to you guys too.
Yeah.
And you were kind of like, I don't care. And she's like,
well, it's the problem is when you have a husband and wife, one goes, the other goes.
But
yeah.
But that's actually not the worst part.
Oh yeah.
The worst part is when you got two people who want something completely different. Oh my God, he was like, oh, I've got a floor guy who could take care of this. I could get the kitchen. I could do this, and I could just hear like, oh, I don't want another project. So it's like, that's a tough dynamic.
Yeah.
That's a tougher dynamic.
Well, and that's probably just a quick note. You were somebody probably were put in that situation a little bit more because you were on HGTV and a couple of shows there, and we didn't know this actually when we found
Yeah,
it.
we did not know.
We didn't know that till we were out running around with
And
you
someone
the
recognized
first time. Yeah, someone recognized him, and we're like, what? And we go search him, and we're like, oh, look at there he is. But it's kind of funny because you do see that on TV, and of course TV has its own drama. But it is very true. I mean, in real life, it's like you got to make sure both people are on the same page.
Sure.
And I think we're pretty, while we can sometimes have our, we can state our opinions, in the end, we're able to kind of look at like, all right, what really makes sense? And I think what you said in terms of, if tomorrow are we going to say like, oh, we should have done something? I think that's true, because we've seen things where we're like, no, it doesn't hit us emotionally in the same way that like we can sort of know what we want and know what's out there, and understand how long it's been since something like this, if ever, has come up, and being able to act on that and know when it's like you've got to act on it or else it's
Right.
Well, the funny thing is I think sometimes Ada uses we in the very narrowest sense possible, because we've been married for 22 years, and sometimes the we is Ada, but
of course.
that's okay.
Yeah, sometimes it does work out that way.
Yeah, it is exactly.
Sometimes there's one person. In the
We is
family who's making the
75%
decision.
me.
Yeah.
Exactly. Do you have anything else? I have one more question for each of you.
I want to say this. If you have questions that you would like to ask Dave, put them in the comments.
Yes.
Yikes.
He'll be so excited.
But so here's my final question: is for actually each of us, and we'll start with David, since you're in the business. You should be answering this really quickly. What is if someone's coming down? They're looking to buy a place. They're very serious. What is the one nugget of wisdom that you would tell them about buying property in Puerto Vallarta?
I would tell them that location matters. It has to be a place where they're going to enjoy it. But and this is counterintuitive for this is not something probably that most people would say, but I tell people to stay within their budget.
Stay within the budget.
Yeah. Just because I just think of that like how I think of things too. It's like if I bought something that was way outside of my budget, and then this was going to be like a vacation home, but it was costing me so much to be down here that I wasn't going to enjoy it, then I'm not sure why I did it.
Yeah.
And I think that, at the end of the day, a real nice benefit of this job is being able to help people. You know, help them sell a house, help them buy a house. I mean, there is a real benefit to that. I mean, I worked as a consultant for a number of years. You know, there is value and there's excitement, and you know, I did enjoy my job in certain degrees, but I wasn't spending my time helping a lot of people necessarily.
Right.
So, and that is different, and it feels good about that. But you want people to be happy with their purchase.
Yeah.
You want them to be, you want them to be here for a while.
Yeah.
And if they are, then that's great. And so, if we can do that, people stay within their budgets, make sure that they're doing something that makes sense for them. It's not stressing them out too much, you know, such that they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? You want a place that you can enjoy. So I guess that's a really verbose answer.
Good words of wisdom. Ada, what's yours? And one nugget of wisdom.
Nugget of wisdom? Well, I think for me now, personality-wise, I'm an extrovert. So I love meeting people. I love being around people. I think if you're an introvert, and you kind of like to have some time and have that space, I think there's some values to sort of recognizing where you fall on that spectrum. And once again, it's kind of like if you're coming down here and this is sort of like you're now wanting to spend a chunk of your life, this is your new lifestyle, do I have people that I can bond with, that I can connect with, that I feel like I am part of a community? Because that's the one thing about Puerto Vallarta that we've really experienced. It is such a community. It's so awesome. And it feels so tiny, you know, in terms of, you know, we run into people, but we're out there, we're putting ourselves in positions to be able to be there. So I think recognize, like, if you're one of those people that really like enjoys that, find a place where, you know, if you're trying to figure out, oh, do I love the views of, you know, maybe it's some place that's you know, much less populated, maybe the views of Ms. Maloya, but you like the energy and the people of being in downtown, that may be a consideration. Or maybe you're like, people fatigue me. I can go and handle them once a week when I do my grocery shopping, and then I just want to have my little space. I think that's a really important thing, and I think something that I think would be a really important. It goes back to location, but I think another consideration of how you choose that location.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think mine is it's kind of a unique one. It's kind of a very narrow, nitpicky one. As you can find the perfect house, the perfect location, around the perfect people. And you could be there and be very, very miserable. Understand your neighborhood extremely well, not on like a colony area, but literally the block area, that you feel like you can be part of that. And sit there for a little bit and just listen to the sounds of the people. And we're actually happy in both of our places that we have, but it could be very much, you know, there's noise everywhere. And if you're not expecting that, and you're coming in, that could be a real problem for you. And
if that's your remote job.
yeah, exactly. If you have a remote job and everything too. So you know, that's really important, I would say, is understand like the nuance, the things that you would not expect to think about when you're buying a house. Think very hard about, you know, is this the place for me, and what could go sideways, and if it does go sideways, then, you know, figure out if that's okay, because in many cases you can't have the perfect location. There will be something, but take that into consideration when you're buying, because when you buy a property, you know, you're not going to want to say, oh, you know what, I don't like it here, I'm going to sell it next year. You probably don't want to do that. You want to be it for, in some cases, you know, the large part of your retirement, for instance. And so it's really important to find the right place. So take your time in doing so.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for coming over and your time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate
No problem.
that you did
Yeah,
that. Well,
this is very good.
Well, hopefully, if you want to see a little more of David, we'll, like I said, we'll make sure we link up with his Facebook group or his Facebook page and everything like that, and you can ask him whatever you need to ask him.
Very good.
Lucky him.
Exactly.
Sounds great.
All right, you guys. We'll see you later. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell or whatever you have to do for those notifications.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. Always a pleasure. Take care, everybody.
Bye. If you made it this far,
Definitely subscribe and join our Facebook group, because if you went through this whole thing, you would love to have the interaction we have there.
take care, everyone.
See ya.
Luego.
I think it's time to wrap. This is a long, long video. I hope you enjoyed it.
All right, bye.